Violently decompressed in a moment, the 6 men of the Byford Dolphin oil platform found themselves caught in history's most horrific diving tragedy. What commenced as a standard saturation descent concluded in an ultimate utter terror. Yet, only one would emerge alive, and not without serious permanent wounds. On Saturday, November 5, 1983, while boring in the Frigg gas reserve within the Norwegian zone of the North Sea, divers Roy P. Lucas, Edwin Coward, Truls Hellevik, and Bjørn Bergersen were assigned with upkeep far beneath the platform. Supporting them were 2 courageous dive handlers, William Cram and Martin Saunders. Truls Hellevik and Bjørn Bergersen dived into a depth of 295 feet for servicing on the base frame of the drilling apparatus. The capacity to access such depths was enabled through the employment of a diving bell, which could attach to a series of compartments where the divers temporarily resided. Unlike ordinary divers, they remained up to 28 days in a confined, high-pressure compartment, laboring, eating, and sleeping. On the Byford Dolphin, the petroleum company demanded the divers endure exhausting 18-hour stretches on barely 3 hours of rest before compelling them back to duty. The compensation was substantial, often ranging from $30,000 to $45,000 per month, yet the working atmosphere was stifling and grueling. The oil rig depended on hundreds of crew members toiling simultaneously to succeed, yet they had no clue of the calamity about to unfold. The 4 divers' routine measures were moments away from transforming into a horrific fatal disaster. As they entered the compressed living sections, the Bell complex consisted of Chamber 1, Chamber 2, an escape capsule mounted atop a lifeboat, and a conduit that linked to the diving bell. The bell would latch onto this conduit as the 2 dive handlers, William Crammond and Martin Saunders, operated it from outside upon the rig. The compressed compartments were stationed on the rig while the diving bell could be detached to descend to the needed depth. This configuration enabled the best application of time and resources, expediting the shift between the high-pressure marine surroundings and the compressed living quarters. When submerging beneath the ocean's surface, pressure is a diver's fiercest adversary. Ambient force rises by roughly 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet of depth. Each extra atmosphere adds a crushing load equal to 14.6 pounds per square inch on the body. The primary problem in diving is not sinking to such pressures, but ascending from them. When plunged deep enough, the mounting water force causes nitrogen and helium to dissolve into the bloodstream, saturating it in ratio to the rise in pressure. This saturation occurs as divers inhale a tailored combination of gases within the chamber, usually containing helium and oxygen, termed heliox. This formula is modified based on the dive's depth, hence the phrase, saturation diving. If divers ascend too hastily, the sudden drop in pressure results in decompression illness, or the bends. This ailment forces the absorbed nitrogen in the blood to revert to gas, forming nitrogen bubbles throughout the body. The bends can bring nausea, vertigo, extreme joint agony, paralysis, and even fatality. The sole method to avert decompression sickness is to gradually return to the surface, granting ample time for the nitrogen to disperse naturally. However, the petroleum trade isn't celebrated for its patience. On this ordinary day, the life support engineers ensured that the air mixture in the hyperbaric habitat matched what the divers required for underwater breathing. Concurrently, the dive operations crew managed the diving bell, hoisting and lowering it with a crane while tracking the divers' work. At 4 a.m., Truls Hellevik and Bjørn Bergersen had just wrapped up their maintenance duties at a pressure of 9 atmospheres, necessary for a depth of 295 feet, and rose back to the surface via the diving bell. Upon arriving, the diving bell had to be reattached to the diving chambers, both operating at exactly identical atmospheric force. Meanwhile, on deck, Roy Lucas and Edwin Coward were resting, prepared to begin the next rotation when Truls and Bjørn returned. One of the most vital positions in saturation diving is the tender, who assists with launching and retrieving the umbilical being the diver's physical lifeline, a thick cord linking their air supply and communications to the surface. In earlier times, tenders were also tasked with docking the diving bell to the compressed living chambers, as on the Byford Dolphin. The tenders carried the lives of their underwater companions in their hands. Nevertheless, they had already been on duty for beyond 12 hours. The 2 seasoned tenders, William Cram and Martin Saunders, were set to connect the diving bell back onto the hyperbaric chambers as Truls Hellevik and Bjørn Bergersen returned from the deep. Crammond successfully fastened the diving bell to the living module and securely placed Bergersen and Hellevik in Chamber 1. This diving crew had executed the sequence repeatedly and knew it instinctively. Under ordinary scenarios, placing divers into the rest zone and detaching the diving bell was relatively simple. The process went as follows. 1. Shut the diving bell hatch, which would have been ajar to the conduit. 2. Slightly heighten the pressure in the bell to seal its door firmly. 3. Shut the chamber 1 hatch, also open to the conduit. 4. Gradually release pressure from the conduit until it reached 1 atmosphere. 5. Unlock the clamp to detach the diving bell from the chamber network. Suddenly, calamity struck. Cramond released the clamp, triggering a sequence that violently decompressed the chambers. The diving bell disconnected before the chamber hatches were completely secured, unleashing an explosive decompression. The pressure gap ripped through the living spaces, dragging Hellevic from his stance as it tore across the deck. The air force inside the bell instantly shifted from 9 atmospheres, the pressure experienced at 297 feet deep, to 1 atmosphere, the normal air force at sea level. The furious burst of air out of the module hurled the heavy diving bell floating in motion like a tiny little stone. The bell struck Cramond and Saunders, gravely injuring them. Either Cramond separated the bell without receiving an instruction to do so, or the dive leader ordered the coupling unlocked despite the conduit still being under pressure. Cramond eventually yielded to death from his wounds. Although Saunders managed to miraculously survive, his escape wasn't without grave body harm. When the crew located him afterward, he was partly pinned beneath the 4-ton bell. His lungs had collapsed from the trauma, and he suffered 3 spinal breaks along with a fractured neck. But the fate of the 4 divers within was far worse. While confirmation is impossible, the speed of the violent and accidental decompression likely ended their lives instantly and without pain. Decompression of this magnitude is a fatal verdict. Survival is impossible. Before we move on, please press the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell if you're yet to do so. That'll be a ray of encouragement for me to keep bringing you these stories. Also, put down your comment below to let me know which story surprised you the most. Unlike the more recent OceanGate tragedy, the Byford dolphin divers' remains were not lost at sea. But understanding exactly what happened to these poor unfortunate men beneath the waves offers little comfort, with very graphic depictions of their bodily trauma preserved in official records of the disaster. The divers never perceived what occurred, nor experienced the dreadful symptoms of their horrific ends. Despite being near the hatch, Lucas, Coward, and Bergerson's blood instantly boiled as immense amounts of absorbed nitrogen reverted to gaseous form. They perished at once. Fat congealed within their arteries, veins, hearts, and livers. The violent gas expansion scattered their blood and remains throughout the chamber's interior. While Lucas, Bergerson, and Coward were rendered unrecognizable, Hellevic met the most grotesque death, being nearest to the connecting hatch. The sudden pressure change jammed the door slightly, forcing his body to be sucked through a 24-inch crescent-shaped gap under a crushing force of 25 tons. His body unable to pass through, the pressure forced his internal organs to burst outward through the little gap. During inspection, examiners discovered Hellevic's spinal column, segments of his windpipe, and part of his small intestine remaining within the bell. His other organs appeared intact, almost as if surgically removed. Ultimately, the calamity claimed 5 lives, and the sheer violence of the event left minimal blood despite the shredded condition of the divers' bodies. Initially, many suspected crew miscommunication or poor procedure as potential causes. The crew often worked beyond 12-hour stretches on most occasions, making it impossible to rule out crew error. However, the precise reason for the incorrect unlatching remained unknown, and with Cramond deceased, the real cause for releasing the clamp also vanished forever. To lessen such extreme hazards, only perfect execution of each operational detail, especially the pressure-controlled transfer, can prevent these disastrous results. Nonetheless, the North Sea Divers Alliance, a group of campaigners including active divers and victims' families, alleged that negligent superiors and dolphin divers' flawed gear were to blame. They insisted the chamber system was antiquated, lacking the necessary safeguards that could have stopped the tragedy. It's however necessary to note that the crew's tools dated back to 1975, devoid of modern fail-safe features. One crucial missing element was an interlock mechanism, which would have stopped Cramond from opening the conduit while the bell was still pressurized. Consequently, officials amended Norwegian laws to require interlock devices for all bell assemblies. Still, many maintained the faulty locking mechanism was the sole cause. Sadly, it took decades for the Norwegian state, which oversaw the Byford dolphin in 1983, to admit responsibility and recompense the families of the lost men. Only in 2009 did the Norwegian government provide undisclosed settlement packs to the relatives of all 6 victims, including Saunders. Reports concluded the malfunctioning equipment, not human fault, caused the accident. But far beyond the defective apparatus, the noisy worksite disrupting communication and unclear directives from the team lead may have also played a role in the tragedy. The Byford Dolphin rig served in offshore drilling for over 40 years, operating worldwide in many places. By 2016, the Byford Dolphin was retired, closing its chapter in the oil and gas realm. Thanks for watching. Click the popped video on your screen to watch some other most mind-blowing tragedies ever. They are real stories and life-touching events, not crafted. See you in our next one. Cheers.